Do you think something shady happened there?
Absolutely.
Porter was found dead in her Southern California home after experiencing flu-like symptoms for 4 days. The coroner ruled her death natural, with the cause listed as labor pneumonia.
In a report issued February 2010, the official cause of Brittany Murphy's death is pneumonia, complicated with anemia and multiple drug intoxication. It is ruled an accidental death.
Sup, Sobers? The recent news and all the allegations surrounding this Sean, P. Diddy, Puff Daddy, Brother Love Combs situation just keeps evolving. It keeps expanding, keeps getting deeper, darker, and the speculation that keeps running around this whole situation gets wilder with each piece of information that gets released. It seems like the more conversation there is about it, the harder it is to figure out what the actual truth is. There's tons of people that are concerned that it's going to be impossible for this guy to get a fair trial when there's so much blown out of proportion and there's so much speculation going on. It's almost like a game of telephone where you're trying to figure out what the truth is by the end of the line, and it's gotten so tainted that you're like, I have no idea what they actually said. Yeah, it's kind of like that. There always seems to be some sort of connection to Diddy, but it definitely is a loose connection. So it begs the question, why do people keep speculating that Diddy had something to do with nearly everything that's going on these days? And one of the things I came across recently that's really got me thinking a little bit deeper is this interview, or I guess this press release from Tony Busby. And if you don't know who Tony Busby is, he is the attorney that is representing the 120 plus plaintiffs in this case that are alleging different things against Sean, P. Diddy, Puff Daddy, Brother Love Combs. And I mean, Tony's a pretty intense guy. Like, he's a pretty intense character. But one of the things that he said was that this whole thing with Diddy goes a whole lot further than just Sean Combs. He says it extends to businesses, corporate entities, and other people that either were complicit or had something directly to do with the things that were going on.
The day will come when we will name names other than Sean Combs, and there's a lot of names. It's a long list already. And of course, I already know who some of these individuals are, but because of the nature of this case, we're gonna make damn sure that we're right before we do that. But the names that we're gonna name, assuming that our investigators confirm and corroborate what we've been told, are names that will shock you. These are individual cases. There are indeed other perpetrators involved. They will be revealed when that particular individual case is ready to be filed. They already know who they are. And I'm talking here about not just the cowardly but complicit bystanders. That is, those people that we know watched this behavior occur and did nothing. But I'm talking about the people that participated, encouraged it, egged it on. They know who they are. These defendants will not only include individuals, but would also include corporate entities who ultimately profited off of this culture and behavior. I'm looking at banks, pharmaceutical companies, hotels. We know that many of these individuals were paid cash. We know that many of these individuals involved, whether they were the ones being assaulted and abused, or they're witnessing other people being assaulted and abused and then paid and threatened and told to leave. Typically paid 10 grand in cash and told to leave, and then threatened as they were leaving.
He's saying that this goes a whole lot deeper than we even thought. And without specifically saying how deep it goes, he gives us a little bit of a hint as to how truly crazy this whole series of allegations and this whole criminal network being uncovered really has been. So how deep does this thing really go? Well, this all just happened just a couple of years after the whole Epstein thing, and that was speculated to be even bigger than this. So with Epstein being such a serious case, and in his time here on Earth ending by his own means, it's very clear that there's likely way bigger fish up the chain that had something bigger to lose than Mr. Jeffrey Epstein. And with this all happening right after that, it makes you wonder, what bigger fish have something to lose in this situation? And are we going to see something similar to what happened with Epstein? If this does go bigger than Diddy, then maybe there is reason for us to suspect that maybe Diddy did have more influence in some of these other things that happened. Maybe he wasn't directly responsible, but maybe he has such a strong criminal network that is relied upon by people higher up. And so, I don't know, I especially wanted to explore that in the case today because one of the most troubling, mysterious, and truly mind-boggling celebrity passings would be that of Brittany Murphy. This story is literally crazy. It's absolutely wild to me. I had such a hard time doing research. My head was literally spinning, and I'm not just saying that. There's so much to dive into with everything in this case, and there's so much unknown that the theories and the speculation is crazy. But there's one question that I was asking that I was trying to find an answer to, and that's, did he have something to do with Brittany Murphy's passing? Or is this just a good old-fashioned coincidence? Well, let's check it out. Sup, sobers? Welcome back to Sobering Stories. We talk about addiction-focused crimes and substance abuse and kind of just the tragedy that it leaves in its wake. My name's DJ Petrovski. I've been sober for 5 years, and I've been trying to find a good way to promote sobriety while also being able to share some stories that I find interesting, because I think there's a lot to be learned from other people's tragic mistakes, and there's a lot to be learned from seeing just truly how dark and scary people in addiction can be. You're truly not yourself sometimes. Last week we talked about Aaron Carter, and that is one of the most tragic stories that I've come across, especially seeing it through the eyes of addiction. But the worst part is his story isn't so different from hundreds of thousands of other people's stories. I'm just trying to bring sobriety to the table because it's changed my life, and I know it can change yours too. So if you're needing help, reach out. I'm always here to help. But anyways, the other thing I wanted to say, business item number 2, is that I just monetized my channel, you guys. And you know why? Because of you. Because you guys did that. And I really appreciate it. I really appreciate all the support, all the love, all the different perspectives and the different, just all the different people that have something to add to the conversation. I really appreciate each and every one of you. And more than that, I appreciate you subscribing, following my channel, following my journey. And I've officially reached a goal. I wanted to monetize my channel before the end of the year, and we still have days before the end of the year, and we are there, you guys. So thank you so much to everybody who subscribed. If that's not you, I highly recommend you join the squad. And other than that, let's keep on cruising each and every week. I try to post on Fridays, and I try to cover an interesting case that is focused around substance abuse, addiction, and somehow ends up in a crime. Without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about Brittany Murphy. The strange, mysterious, coincidental, random, far too early passings of multiple celebrities has been going on since well before the early 2000s. This is something that's been going on for years. Sean Diddy Combs has been operating his network for almost 30 years. So with all these similarities between all these different celebrity passings and just the strange circumstances that all surround most of them, it has led so many people to question, and not only that, they've tied links between all these different cases. And now with all the news coming out about Diddy, people are finally starting to put the pieces together. And some of this stuff is pretty wild. Like I mentioned before, last week we talked about Aaron Carter, and in my research for this case, I actually came across something in that same Tony Busby interview that just immediately struck a chord with me, the similarities in what he said and the Aaron Carter story. And what he had said was...
Another instance, this individual who was 9 years old at the time was taken to an audition in New York City with Bad Boy Records. Other boys were there to audition as well. All of them were trying to land a record deal. All of them were minors. This individual was sexually abused, allegedly by Sean Combs and several other people at the studio in the promise to both his parents and to him himself of getting a record deal.
With Tony saying that it was a 9-year-old victim being the youngest known victim, this victim was also promised record deals and, ways into the music industry. It makes you wonder, was this 9-year-old victim the 9-year-old little Aaron Carter that met P. Diddy way back in the day? Little, vulnerable Aaron Carter just trying to make his way in this crazy music industry. It wouldn't even surprise me if that was what he was talking about. There's more investigation going on into what happened with Aaron, especially after this recent bail hearing that Diddy had. Now, I talk about a lot of things in this episode that are related to the Aaron Carter episode. So in my personal opinion, I would recommend you go watch that one first, and then you can come back to this one, because there's certain things I'm not going to go through again. But it's a good episode. I think you'll like it. And when you're done with that, come right back here and then pick up where we left off. Now, even more interesting to me than Aaron Carter, even more suspicious, a case that's filled with mystery and intrigue and no answers, is the story of Brittany Murphy. Brittany Murphy was literally a national treasure. She was featured in so many amazing films, but she was just loved by everybody because of her energetic, fun, bubbly personality. And not only that, but her ability to act and just perform on the stage was unmatched. She had what they would say is the it quality, if you know what I'm saying. But that was up until 2009, when at the age of 32, she was found unresponsive in her bathroom. So what does that have to do with 2024? Or Diddy? There are three main theories about what possibly could have happened to Brittany Murphy that have been popular over the years. There's numerous other not so popularized theories, but there's three main ones. The similarities between Brittany Murphy's passing and Kim Porter's passing has exploded the internet, because it is all too similar. There is so many eerie coincidences that it just makes you wonder. And in light of that news, a new theory is arising, trying to explain what might have happened to Brittany Murphy. I mean, pneumonia, bathtub, doesn't that sound familiar? Following the recent bail hearing that Diddy just had, and he was denied bail for the final time, there's been tons of speculation that the FBI has reopened investigations into multiple celebrities' passings, and not just recent, a lot of celebrity passings from the past. People like Aaron Carter, Kim Porter, Brittany Murphy, and multiple others. And the interesting circumstances surrounding the hospitalization that Jamie Foxx experienced literally out of nowhere. In light of that, I want to talk about the three main theories surrounding Brittany Murphy's untimely passing. I want to talk about the alleged ties that Diddy might have to this passing. And I want to talk about how deep Diddy's network really goes. But most importantly, I want to know what you guys think, because like I said, while I was researching this, my head was spinning. And so it always helps to have some perspective, some fresh perspective from people who might know more than me. But drop it in the comments below and let me know what you think. But if you don't know who Brittany is, Brittany Ann Bertolotti was born November 10th, 1977 in Atlanta, Georgia. She was born to mother Sharon and father Angelo. It wasn't a very healthy relationship from the start. Her dad was involved with an Italian crime mafia, and he dealt with substances and did some other things. And when she was roughly the age of 3, he was caught and thrown in prison for 12 years. And so this left him completely absent from her life. And unfortunately, he wasn't a very good husband at this point either. So Sharon decided she was going to divorce him, and she was going to move to New Jersey, up to Edison, New Jersey. And she was going to get a fresh start, divorced from her husband, and she was going to give Brittany a better chance at something better than what they were given down there. Brittany would grow up estranged from her father, and she would adopt the Murphy last name, which is her mom's last name, as opposed to Bertolotti. A much less Italian last name, I guess, but probably better for the big screen anyways. It seems like growing up without her father left a lasting impact on her development, and especially her relationship life. Her friend said that she did not have the best taste in men, and she seemed hyper-focused on getting married. It seemed like she had no other goal but, I want to get married, and I want to settle down and have the picture-perfect knight in shining armor wedding, and I want to have the perfect little family. And I mean, I can't blame her, like that's what every girl's dream is, but she seemed ultra hyper focused on achieving that goal. People would describe her as a hopeless romantic, and I think that a lot of these issues probably just stemmed from the fact that she didn't have her dad around. She didn't have that male affection, and I think she desperately craved it. Those childhood wounds, man, they can go deep. Brittany began her stage career at the age of 4 years old. She went to the Vern Fowler School of Dance and Theater Arts, and she also went to musical comedy classes, and this was just so she could kind of like corral her energy. She was known to be super energetic, super fun, and just kind of off the walls as a kid. By 10 years old, she already got her first leading role in a play. Her first play was Really Rosie, and she was late by an hour to the audition. But because of her charm and just the way she went in and approached the auditioners, and just the way that she was, her energetic, bubbly, lovable personality just immediately won the hearts of everybody in the room. But more than that, they were impressed with how well she could act, how good her voice was, And they knew that this was the girl for the play. So at 10 years old, she's already busting into this theater, this acting world, and she's not only good at it, but she loves it too. But by the age of 13, she had already outgrown her little New Jersey acting scene, and she was looking towards bigger and brighter futures. Her mom asked her what she really wanted to do, and she said she really wanted to pursue acting. She wanted to be in Hollywood. And so her mom made a huge sacrifice and packed everything up and moved them both all the way out to California, just to make it a little bit easier for her daughter to succeed. I love that about her. She immediately started getting roles in commercials, sitcoms, different pilots, and other actresses that worked around her said that she would go from pilot to pilot. She was always super busy, always getting new roles, and her freaking IMDb is very extensive. She's got a lot of stuff. Her filmography is huge. So, I mean, a lot of those movies are really good too. She's got a lot of huge blockbusters on her list. The craziest part about Brittany Murphy is it seems like she can go from one complete extreme to another, and despite having to do that, she destroys the role no matter what. She is absolutely amazing, and she's such a great actress. And not only that, she's freaking hot. But unfortunately, the entertainment industry would tell her otherwise. Despite being cast as Ty in the movie Clueless, which is a timeless classic movie, I love that movie, it's a really good one, she was cast as like one of the supposedly not so beautiful girls in the movie. That to me is telling of Hollywood, that Brittany Murphy is considered to be not so beautiful. Like, what is going on, you guys? But regardless, she still rose to huge success. Her role in that movie was amazing, and everybody loved her. She blew up overnight because of this movie, Clueless. Brittany was so busy, she would just attend school on set like most young stars do. They don't have time to go to a regular school. They're too busy making millions of dollars in gold records.
I put my pants on, just like the rest of you, one leg at a time. Except once my pants are on, I make gold records.
You know, they just don't have the opportunity to go to a normal school. So they hire tutors that are with them on set. They do some studying and learning in between filming and when they're not actually on set. But besides that, she didn't attend any official school at this time. And kind of like I mentioned in my Liam Payne episode and the Aaron Carter episode, these young stars are robbed of their childhoods. They're robbed of these defining, really growing moments during your life where you should be allowed to learn and make mistakes and come back from those. But when you're thrust into starlight like this, you don't get the opportunity to make mistakes without being constantly criticized. Immediately, Brittany Murphy was thrown into a world where she was body shamed. She was immediately thrown into a world where she felt like even though she was an amazing actress, she still wasn't enough because of how she looked. And that's truly heartbreaking. And it just speaks to how dirty Hollywood really is and how expensive the price of fame is. In an interview with Interview Magazine, that's actually what it's called, she was told by a very important person in Hollywood that she was huggable, but she was not like... I don't know how to say it without like using curse words. It's really hard, but she's not bangable. And that is the reason why she did not get the part that she was trying to get at the time. And that is absolutely insane and disgusting all at the same time. She said that this was a defining moment for her. She started dressing differently. She dyed her hair blonde. She suddenly dropped a ton of weight out of nowhere, even though she didn't really have a lot of weight to lose, really. And she started to try and morph herself into the picture-perfect Hollywood actress. She was obviously living outside of her comfort zone. She was obviously sacrificing herself to please other people. And there's no world in which you do that and it doesn't have negative consequences. And this is when people start speculating that she was using substances. People speculate she was using all kinds of different substances. Nobody ever has any legitimate proof. There's not photos or anything, but tons of speculation. And more than that, they also think maybe she has an eating disorder. She just lost so much weight that it was very concerning, and people were speculating that she had to have done something unhealthy to achieve that. And to be honest, they were probably right, because that's what Hollywood pushed her to do. That is what the pressures of being famous and having yourself be thrust into the limelight like that really can do to a person. Aaron Carter was also really big on talking about body shaming because he was body shamed for his image issues and likely because he was also an addict. But the body shaming thing is no joke. And for somebody who's an addict, you get body shamed, you get made to feel worse because of your addiction or your abuse. And it leads you to either make changes or go further down that rabbit hole of addiction. People have to understand how sensitive and how really dangerous addiction can be, especially for someone who's that far gone into it. Despite these concerns, she gives multiple amazing, phenomenal performances in tons of different movies. Movies like Don't Say a Word. One of my favorites, this movie is called Spun. I don't know if many people have seen it. I don't know a lot of people that have, but it talks about a substance dealer and this guy who's addicted to substances. And it's just a really interesting indie film, but Brittany Murphy absolutely crushes it in that film. It's got Mickey Rourke and Jason Schwartzman. Man, it's hard to say his name, but it's a really good movie. Check it out if you haven't seen it. She was in 8 Mile, which is another really dark movie where she played a really dark role, but she was amazing in that movie. And so was Eminem, of course. And one of America's favorite movies with one of the cutest couples ever seen on screen, Ashton Kutcher and Brittany Murphy in the movie Just Married, which is another quality film. Now, many of you may know, some of you don't, that Ashton Kutcher was really close pals with Diddy. They hung out a lot. They would go on runs together. Diddy even called him a sounding board, and he called him an entertainment mogul himself. And so the two of them were super close. And in light of all the recent allegations with Diddy, Mila Kunis and Ashton Kutcher have been talking about possibly fleeing the country because they want to distance themselves completely, because they know that he has close ties with him and they know that they were friends. But it leads you to wonder, is he leaving because he doesn't want to be around the drama, or is it because he doesn't want to be subpoenaed as a defendant? You can start to see Diddy wiggling his way into our storyline here. Now, photos start coming out showing that these two Hollywood superstars are taking their on-camera chemistry off camera. And the tabloids would be right, because Ashton Kutcher and Brittany Murphy did start dating. It ended 3 months after the release of Just Married. Brittany might have just been feeling the warmth and the love, the specialness that she was getting from the acting role, and likely that just translated off screen. And then when the movie fizzled out, it's almost like it wasn't what I thought it was. And then as quickly as it started, the two of them broke up. It's hard for me to believe that Ashton Kutcher had anything to do with Brittany Murphy's passing, because the two of them were only together for a short time. But the fact that they ended so quickly after the completion of that movie leads you to wonder, maybe she saw something that she didn't like, or maybe he exposed her to something that she was not down with. AKA some sort of Diddy white party or a freak off or anything going on in the music industry surrounding Sean P. Diddy, Puff Daddy, Brother Love Combs. So if she saw something and then immediately made it known that she was not about it, and then also broke up with Ashton, it just makes you wonder, maybe she knew too much. Maybe she was a target. Maybe somehow she was always a target because of this. I thought maybe it was just this one-off kind of a thing with Ashton, but similar thing happened with Eminem, Marshall Mathers, in the movie 8 Mile. She said in an interview that she did actually have something with Marshall Mathers, but she says, well, it came, it went, you know. So it sounds like it was just a fling, but still it seems like that on-camera chemistry just gives her those feelings that she's looking for, and she immediately falls for that person, you know? So I think she's seeing what she wants through making these films and through acting, but unfortunately, once the acting is over, real life is a whole different story. So maybe that's why things are falling apart, because same thing, it was a quick trip with Marshall Mathers. Right after she breaks up with Ashton Kutcher, she begins dating this guy. His name's Jeff Quatinetz. Jeff Quatinetz. I don't know who this guy is, but same thing, that only lasted about 4 months. Right after that, she begins dating in December of 2005, Joe Macaluso, and this would again only last about 4 months before it would end in about April of 2006. So I don't know, I bring these up because it just kind of shows you the manifestation of her childhood traumas and kind of how those are showing their face in her adult life. And even more than that, her body shaming issues could be due to the fact that she would be willing to do anything it took to get that love and appreciation from other people because, well, she was missing it from her dad throughout her childhood. So I don't know. I'm really just talking at this point. So I'll refocus. It was in 2006 that Brittany would meet an unknown British screenwriter named Simon Monjack, and Simon Monjack would probably be the worst possible thing that ever happened to Brittany Murphy, 100% no doubt. Up until this point, she struggled with her body shaming issues, substance abuse, possible eating disorder, but it got a whole lot worse once Simon entered the picture. It's like throwing gasoline on a fire. But just like gasoline on a fire, this is where things start to get interesting. Simon Monjack met Brittany Murphy during the filming of The White Hotel. Simon was a director, and of course Brittany was acting, And this is a movie that would never make it past production. But Simon Monjack was a self-proclaimed billionaire. He was the #1 collector of Johannes Vermeer's artwork. She's a French painter. And he also said that he had an extensive collection of Lamborghinis, Ferraris, all kinds of different sports cars. And he's a survivor of terminal cancer. He said that he survived terminal cancer because he had some crazy special new treatment using shark fins where he was then cured. Or was he? Because Simon Monjack, aka Simon Konjac, is a grade A compulsive liar and manipulator. And none of the things that I just said were actually true. Who lies about having cancer? That's messed up on a whole new level. Not only was he a grade A compulsive liar, he was also a B-grade screenwriter from the UK. Not very many people knew who he was. He was fresh out of a 5-year marriage. During that 5-year marriage, he actually fathered 2 illegitimate children with 2 different women that were not his wife, of course. He faced a mountain of legal trouble. He was being sued by credit card companies for credit card fraud, and he was also being sued for over $500,000 after being evicted from multiple different properties. And this was all happening leading up to when he met Brittany Murphy in 2006. He quickly became close with Brittany, and with all of the tabloids reporting about how vulnerable and all the different troubles that she seemed to be going through at the time, she seemed like a pretty vulnerable, easy target for a con man like Mr. Monjack. Over the course of the next year, Simon would get rid of everybody on Brittany's team and replace everyone as her sole manager. Her substance abuse issues and her weight got tremendously worse, and she started to experience serious mental health issues around the same time. Simon isolated her from all of her friends and family. He made her get rid of her email and phone, so any contact with her had to be made through him directly as her manager. Truly seeing the signs of someone who's grooming and isolating and truly a predator. Friends and family would recount that he would constantly body shame her. He would make her feel bad for her hair looking a certain way. He would make her feel bad for certain outfits that she would wear. Just would add to the body shaming issues that she had and would continue to make her feel like she needed to lose even more weight, which likely led to her developing even worse eating disorders than she already had. More than anything, it probably crushed her spirit, and unfortunately, the beautiful, bright, energetic, fun, bubbly star that we once knew seemed to be fading out. Despite all these red flags, friends and family members constantly telling her that Simon was bad news, and even an intervention by her family members telling her, "You need to stay away from this guy. He's not good for you. He's bad news." Despite all of that, she still decided in May of 2007 to get married. They had a small private Jewish ceremony in Los Angeles. Only a few people were present, and it was kind of a real impromptu kind of a wedding. Of course, Simon moved in with Brittany because he, didn't have any money. Brittany lived with her mom Sharon at the time as well. Over the course of the relationship, things would just continue to get worse. She would get more isolated. He would pick her up and take her to any of her acting commitments that she had. Essentially, he was just always with her. The two were never seen apart. The two of them became extremely reclusive, and at some point, they installed a 56 camera security system in their house equipped with fingerprint scanning locks and a scrambler so that anybody that's trying to listen in on their conversations or tap their phones couldn't do it. It's around the same time people start talking about Brittany Murphy's performance in different roles, and especially people directing films she's on. They talk about how difficult it really was to work with her. She wasn't remembering lines. She seemed really out of it. And then in one account, she was actually supposed to do a love scene with a guy in one of the films she was doing. And Simon threw a huge fit. He wouldn't let her do it. He did not want it to happen. And so much they were like, well, we're just going to have to find somebody else for the role then, because this is a part of the movie. And then Simon kind of changed his tune, like, oh no, we can't afford, like, we need her to have this. So he kind of changed his tune. He said, let me talk to her. I'll see what I can do. And then after that, suddenly she did the scene. So he just, even on set, even when she's working, he's trying to control every little move she makes. Not only did she get worse on the set, but her career seemed to be slowly going downhill as well. She went from being in multiple blockbuster hits that were making millions and millions of dollars in sales to being in slasher horror films that were going straight to DVD. Quite the contrast from her previous roles and her rise to stardom. With all of the different reports talking about how Brittany really just seemed kind of like a sloppy mess at this point, tons of speculation is going around that she's abusing substances and struggling with an eating disorder, both of which she denies vehemently that she ever has done, not even once. The one thing that I did notice, though, is that she was responding specifically to the white powder when she was saying that. She wasn't necessarily talking about an eating disorder. So who really knows if it's more cryptic than that, but it seems like she likely struggled with an eating disorder. And the other thing I believe she struggled with more than like hard mainstream substances were prescription medication. But despite her denying all these allegations and the speculation about her substance abuse and her eating disorder, she still says vehemently she never did it. But there's tons of red flags to the contrary. In 2009, Brittany traveled down to Puerto Rico for the filming of a movie called The Caller. It was another horror kind of slasher film. And she went down and she brought her mom and Simon with her, and they were just going to hang out and, enjoy Puerto Rico while she was down there working. But that didn't last very long, because on the very first day of filming, there's a lot of speculation about what happened exactly. But the director of the film said that their behavior on set, not only Brittany's, but Simon's, just was too much, and they decided to go with somebody else. So they replaced her with Rachel Lefevre. I don't know. She's from Twilight. But anyways, they replaced her. And because of that, she didn't have a job. She had no reason to be in Puerto Rico, but they decided to stay down there for a couple of weeks anyways, just enjoy Puerto Rico, enjoy being away from home. Unfortunately, Brittany got super sick while she was down there. She actually was sick for 2 weeks while she was in Puerto Rico before they finally decided to come home. On that ride home, Simon actually had a heart attack on the plane ride. He had to have EMTs take him to the hospital when they finally landed in California. So truly crazy, and we're not really sure what happened when they were down in Puerto Rico, but suddenly both her and Simon were extremely sick by this point, all following this random drama down in Puerto Rico over this film, The Caller. Now, Brittany's situation progressively got worse after getting back to California. She slowly started experiencing more intense symptoms, and she was becoming more and more bedridden to where she could barely even get out of bed or move. She was on a ton of prescription medication, and she was taking a ton of over-the-counter, cough and cold medicines to try and make her feel better. Everybody's wondering, why didn't she just go to the doctor? I mean, it's Brittany Murphy. She could have literally had a doctor come to her house even, I would imagine, right? Oh, wait, no, probably not, because Simon seems to be very controlling and not allow certain things to happen. So who knows what was actually going on and why she wasn't able to get to a doctor, but she didn't. And unfortunately, she scheduled a doctor's appointment for the 21st of December, which would have been Monday. And this was on the 18th of December that she scheduled it. Unfortunately, she wouldn't make it past the 20th of December, which is where she would be found unresponsive in the bathroom after complaining that she thought she was going to be going away. On Sunday night, Brittany collapsed in her bathroom. The last thing she said to her mom was, "I love you." And she told her that she thought she was not going to be here any longer. And so that made Sharon panic, but apparently not enough, because she didn't call 911 right away. She threw her into a cold shower, tried to get her to wake up, and then realizing that she wasn't waking up, then she made the frantic phone call to 911. That's weird, right?
Fire Department 97, what's the address of the emergency?
1895 Rising Glen Road.
What's the phone number you're calling from? Tell me exactly what happened.
Oh, somebody's passed out.
Somebody what?
My daughter's passed out. We're doing mouth to mouth. Please get here quick, please.
Okay. All right, we're going to. How old is your daughter?
She's 30. Please hurry.
She's 30?
To her mouth.
Can you feel or hear any breathing?
Can you feel or hear any breathing?
Can you feel or hear any breathing? Yes or no, ma'am? Hello? Hello? Hello?
Just a minute, please.
It just takes a second. Can you feel or hear any breathing?
Can you hear anything, Simon?
Yes or no?
Yes or no? No!
Okay, all right. Listen to me carefully. I'm going to tell you how to do compressions, okay?
Brittany, please come back!
Ma'am? Is he still pumping on her chest?
Yes.
Okay, he needs to continue, okay?
He is.
Did anybody see what happened? Ma'am? Did anybody see what happened?
She was dizzy. She couldn't walk right. She's had a cold. Oh, my God.
Is she taking any kind of medications at all?
What?
Is she taking no medications, nothing?
However, unfortunately, Brittany was pronounced unresponsive, unalived, and no longer with us upon arriving at the hospital. Unfortunately, there was nothing that could be done, and the official manner determined by the coroner's report is that she passed from pneumonia and anemia with complications from prescription medication. So obviously she had a lot of prescription medication in her system that added to something that happened. Now, the issues and the crazy circumstances surrounding Brittany Murphy's passing are many. And of course, Simon, being the spouse and being as shady as he seemed to be, was suspect number one. One of the very first things that he did that raised tons of red flags, especially if you're somebody who follows a lot of true crime like I do, was that he was very against having an autopsy performed, which is one of the first things I would want to have performed if I was Simon, but I'm not Simon, and he didn't want an autopsy performed. And like I said, if you follow true crime, then you know that that is a huge red flag, like something's up. Adding to the speculation that Simon had something to do with this is all of the weird things that he was doing after Brittany's passing. And one of the most troubling things for me was how close him and Sharon Murphy became after Brittany had passed. In all of the photos that are taken of them, they seem more like a couple than they seem like in-laws. It's just very strange. Just look at them. Look at these pictures. Is this how you take a picture with your mother-in-law? I don't think so. Even more than that, Amber Ryland, who's a reporter doing a story on Brittany Murphy's passing and talking with Simon after everything happened, he's giving her a tour of the house, and she happens to notice that the bed is messed up on both sides. And so she asks, like, oh, is there somebody that's staying here, or is there somebody else that lives up here with you? And he said, oh no, Sharon sometimes gets sad and she crawls into bed with me and we cry together. That's kind of weird, right? Like that's not normal, I don't think. With his history of control, his trouble with the law, and this mountain of debt that he likely had before meeting Brittany Murphy, he was obviously stealing a lot of her money, trying to pay off some of this debt and continue maintaining his lavish lifestyle. This obviously leads the media and tons of people to believe that he is solely responsible for what happened to Brittany Murphy. And everything seems like it was pointing to Simon up until 5 months later, when Simon ends up unresponsive in the very same home, in the very same bathroom, where Brittany found herself unresponsive. Official coroner's report says pneumonia and anemia, as well as complications with prescription medication. What's going on here? So with Simon now out of the picture, what the fart do we think now? This is where the theories really start circulating. This is where people start coming up with ideas as to why this happened, who could have been behind this. Was this a coincidence? Was this natural? What happened to these two people? Now, there is 3 mainstream, widely accepted theories that might have happened to Simon and Brittany. Theory number 1 focuses around the possibility that the two might have actually been poisoned by toxic mold that was growing in the home. And I mean, if you think about it, it does kind of make sense, because 2 people passing away in the same home, what's the common denominator here? Well, the house. Brittany Murphy had purchased her 5-bed, 5-bath Hollywood mansion from Britney Spears, I know a lot of Britneys, in 2003. It was $3.85 million and came fully furnished. Truly just a gorgeous, amazing property. The home itself was a picturesque mansion with absolutely breathtaking views, and the open layout was just spectacular in my opinion. I mean, that'll be me someday, you guys. Both Britneys actually recount that the property was full of structural problems, and one of the main issues was that the foundation actually had serious leaking issues. And Brittany Murphy actually was so upset about all of this that she actually filed a lawsuit against the original building company for the issues with the foundation and the leaks that they endured. And this is a really expensive multi-million-dollar home in California, so it's one of those really nice low-energy efficiency houses which doesn't have a lot of ventilation. So say there was mold that was growing from this moisture getting into the foundation and causing this mold to grow in their house. If there was mold, then there is no way that they wouldn't be breathing it in, because the ventilation is so poor, they're not getting fresh air at any point. Black mold is one of the most toxic forms of mold. If inhaled, it can be very seriously life-threatening to humans. The other peculiar thing is that it could mimic and look very similar to the symptoms that you would have if you were experiencing pneumonia. However, some of the other symptoms that you might experience if you were experiencing toxic black mold poisoning would be hallucinations, insomnia, anxiety, depression, other mental neurological issues that are caused by this fungus that's actually growing inside of your body. And let's just take note that of the 90 prescription bottles that were found near the bedside of Brittany Murphy and Simon Monjack, tons of them were anti-anxiety and anti-depression pills. So they were obviously struggling pretty seriously with depression and anxiety. Whether it's correlated or not, that's up for debate. Adding more to the speculation is the fact that Simon actually did have the house treated for mold. This was after Brittany's passing, though. So he had the home treated for mold, but maybe he was just doing that as a precaution just in case he was subjected to the same thing. But because he had it treated for mold, people are taking that as evidence that, well, the house had mold. Sharon herself is actually the one that made this a mainstream theory because she truly believed and kept telling everybody that she thought there might have been mold in the home. And that could have been the reason for their untimely passing. The thing that gets me, though, is that black mold poisoning is extremely toxic, but it's extremely toxic to people who have a weakened immune system. Think COVID, you guys. People who are overweight, people who struggle with other immune diseases, people who struggle with getting sick regularly, elderly people, young people, very young people, like kids. Those are all people that are very susceptible to black mold poisoning. Sharon Murphy is a 2-time cancer survivor. She's been through chemo a couple times. She's recovered and she's in remission, but you'd imagine that her body probably has a pretty weakened immune system at this point. So you would think if black mold was strong enough to take out Simon and Brittany, why didn't it take out Sharon too? On top of that, Ed Winter. I talked about Ed Winter in my Aaron Carter one, so go back and check that one out. I talk more about him there. But as we know, Ed Winter is an interesting character. And on top of everything else, he has been the celebrity coroner for multiple different celebrity passings. Ed Winter, after doing his report, said that there was no findings of any fungus or any sort of mold in their lungs or around their body anywhere. And so there's no definitive proof in his mind that they did actually get poisoned from some sort of toxic mold. So that kind of crushed that theory and kind of put it to bed fairly quickly. The other thing I did some research on was, can toxic mold poisoning or poisoning by any other like actual substance like cyanide or something like that, can those be something that would trigger anemia as well? Because those poisons can mimic flu-like symptoms and certainly can cause pneumonia. But anemia is certainly something that I was like, is that a possibility? It's said that it is a possibility, but it is not typically a direct correlation. There's not typically a correlation between someone who has been poisoned and anemia. However, the correlation between diet and anemia is very strong. If you have a huge iron deficiency and your body is lacking in tons of different nutrients that it needs, then it's likely because you're not getting them from your diet. And with the speculation that Brittany Murphy had a serious eating disorder, same thing with Simon Monjack leading up to his passing, it said that he wasn't eating, he wasn't sleeping, he was experiencing hallucinations, he was experiencing all these things that were causing him to lose a ton of weight, and he just looked disheveled, looked like a mess. He was a hot mess. Because of that, he probably wasn't eating very much, and maybe he was experiencing diet-caused anemic conditions. So that was something that I kind of came across that I thought was a little bit interesting. It lends more credibility to the fact that Brittany Murphy might have actually had an eating disorder. I've got to say, I was at first pretty convinced that it might have been toxic mold poisoning, especially because of the house thing. But with the official coroner's report, what are we to believe? He said that it wasn't. But can we really trust Ed Winter? It seems like every time we answer one question, we get 2 more questions that pop up. This case just keeps getting crazier and crazier. Now, the second theory I want to focus on is the theory that Sharon herself actually was responsible for taking out the 2 of them. And of course, she's going to get blamed. She was the only person that made it out of that house alive. Nobody else was able to do it. So of course, people are going to speculate and wonder, did she have something to do with it? Brittany Murphy had recently just signed over everything in her will to her mom, and she actually excluded Simon completely from her will. And she fought really hard to make sure that that happened. And because of some silly loopholes, unfortunately, after she passed, it didn't really work out the way she wanted it to. Simon was still able to steal hundreds of thousands of dollars from her before her estate was ever divided up or anything was officialized, and just continued taking her money up until he was found passed away under similar circumstances. Having everything signed over in her will to her mom, that would be pretty serious motivation for her to want to take out these 2 individuals, right? Also, Sharon's actions around the time of both of their passing was just strange. She didn't immediately call 911 like I mentioned. She put Brittany's body in a cold shower trying to wake her back up. She never called a doctor prior to any of this happening, even though her daughter's symptoms had only progressed over the course of 2 weeks. And even more than that, she also denied trying to allow people to have an autopsy done on both Simon and Brittany For whatever reason, she did not want an autopsy done. If that was my kid, I would need to know. There's no way I wouldn't have an autopsy done. If they said we're not doing one, I might have to do it myself. But what's fueling these allegations? Sharon was known to love Brittany more than anything, and she was super close with Brittany, so much that they lived together. It just didn't seem like it was in her character to then go this route, to unalive her daughter for money. It just didn't feel right. Something was off. So what's fueling these allegations? Well, Brittany's dad comes out of the woodworks way later on, and he's not satisfied with the official coroner's report. He thinks there's something more nefarious going on, and he's pushing to try and get a more thorough investigation by the police and by the examiners, the medical examiners, anybody who will listen. He's trying to push them to do a more thorough investigation to get some answers. And nobody listens to him. Nobody does anything, and unfortunately, they leave it up to him. If he wants to get answers, he's going to have to do it himself. He's able to finally push to get some of Brittany's hair tested, because he believes if we test her hair follicles to test for the toxicology of what's in her hair, we might be able to figure out what substances were in her system at the time she passed away. And as we know, she was already under the influence of multiple different prescription medications, lots of anti-anxiety medication, depression, different forms of medication. She was even on some painkillers as well. It didn't seem like she was abusing them in any way because they were all fairly normal doses. If we test her hair follicles, then we'll be able to see what kind of toxicology comes back with that, and maybe it'll lead us to see that there was something else going on. Lo and behold, the toxicology on the hair follicles come back, and it is filled with different toxins and chemicals. The results were pretty striking, actually. She tested positive for barium, uranium, tin, copper, manganese, and sulfur. All of these things can be found in your typical rat and insect poisons you can go pick up at Walmart. And immediately, Angelo, which is Brittany's dad, was convinced that maybe Sharon had something to do with it, because in order to administer these types of poisons to somebody, you'd have to be pretty close to them. You'd have to be able to get close enough to administer it to their drink, their food, somehow get it into their system. Who was close to them that didn't actually pass away like they did? Sharon. And so speculation runs wild yet again that maybe Sharon had something to do with it. When you experience being poisoned, especially over a longer period of time, you do experience very similar symptoms to being sick or like having a really bad flu. The difference is you don't end up getting better from that flu. The similarities between the two, I could see why people thought that. Adding even more fuel to the fire is the fact that Simon had some pretty gnarly black mucus coming out of his nose and mouth when he passed away. And when you are poisoned, there's a crazy buildup of mucus because of the inflammation in your throat, and it often causes you to expel some pretty gnarly looking mucus when you do finally pass. The presence of this mucus leads them to believe one of them or both of them were likely poisoned. When Ed Winter asked Sharon Murphy if he could come over and test the house for black mold or any other sort of toxins to see if maybe there was something going on in the house that caused them to pass like this, Sharon denied, no way, you're not coming over and testing this house. And then shortly after that, she sells the house for $1 million less than the house was even bought for. And she moves out quickly, and the house is completely destroyed from the inside out and remodeled completely. However, like I mentioned before, nobody would have it. Nobody's believing it because Sharon was just too close with Brittany. And she was obviously really awkwardly, weirdly close to Simon as well, so it didn't seem likely that she would be responsible for this. And even more than that, Ed Winter, yet again, comes back with a report saying that the toxins that were found in Brittany's hair likely were caused by the multiple hair dyes that she was constantly using. Her hair was constantly under stress because she was changing the color for different movie roles or just to change her appearance. And all of these different chemicals could have been found because of all the different hair dyes. Yet again, our boy Ed Winter nullifies that theory and basically throws it out of the water. But yet again, our mysterious coroner guy, Ed Winter, who, like I mentioned in the Aaron Carter video, might have ties to Diddy. Maybe he was being controlled by Diddy. He also did Kim Porter's autopsy, so it just makes you wonder. It really makes you wonder. The police did a pretty thorough investigation, including people like Sharon who were close to Brittany, and they didn't ever suspect her. She wasn't even a person of interest. There doesn't seem to be a whole lot of support to this theory, simply because people couldn't get past the fact that there's no way that Sharon did this. Now, no video is complete without a good old-fashioned government conspiracy thrown in there. And this third theory is the one that really got my attention and really started making me question how deep this Diddy circle might actually go. Now, this theory revolves around a young lady named Julia Davis. She is a whistleblower from the Department of Homeland Security, and she was working as, border security in the early 2000s, trying to keep people that were criminals or terrorists out of the country. And if they were admitted into the country, then she was at least supposed to document them and put them on some sort of special watch list as a person of interest, and just kind of keeping tabs, making sure our borders are safe and that our national security is at the forefront of her job role. As most of us know, after 9/11, the fear of terrorism and the threat of terrorism was at an all-time high. In 2004, there was supposedly an expected Al-Qaeda infiltration that was supposed to happen. And they weren't really sure exactly where it was going to happen or what was going to happen, but they just told everybody monitoring the borders to be on extra special lookout for anybody or anything suspicious. And so that's what she did. Julia Davis was doing her job and she took it seriously. That same night, however, 23 people that were listed as persons of interest were allowed to enter into the country. And these people were all people that were known terrorists or people that were suspected to be terrorists. But it seemed to her that there was some sort of cover-up going on to where these people were allowed to come into the country. For her, she said it was just strange that so many of them came over through the same area all at the same time. It just seemed a little bit strange. Maybe a few in one night, maybe a few here and there, but for 23 all in one night through the same location, it just seemed fishy. So she reported it to her supervisor, and she was expecting to hear back, thinking, this is pretty important. This is national security. Something fishy's going on. But she got no response. Per her employee handbook, she's expected to escalate things if her immediate supervisor doesn't take the proper course of action. So she escalated it and made an official report to the FBI. And this caused a world of trouble for her. Unfortunately, instead of being a whistleblower, this ended up having the opposite effect. The Department of Homeland Security was more desperate than ever to try and keep this quiet and make sure that nothing got out about the possibility that they were allowing terrorists into the country and that there was something going on to where these people were allowed by higher-ups in our own Homeland Security teams. And in order to keep her quiet, they started a huge smear campaign to try and make sure that even if people did hear what she had to say, they didn't believe her because, well, they smeared her name so bad and made her look so bad that she just wasn't credible. Things took a really dark turn when she was formally listed as a domestic terrorist by the Department of Homeland Security. On August 10th of 2005, they raided her home. And they didn't just raid her home. They raided it using Black Hawk helicopters and the most intense raid that you've ever seen. This was all caught on camera by her neighbor. His name was Matthew Judd. I looked really hard for the video, but I think it's been taken down. I could not find it. So if you happen to see it or find it or know where to find it, then please let me know. Share the link. But during this raid, they were looking for anything and everything they could possibly put up against her to charge her with something. Her husband, BJ, who was a Hollywood producer at the time, for whatever reason, he had lost his ability to own guns. He must have gotten in trouble with the law for some reason. And so when they did this raid, they found multiple firearms. And because of that, they arrested him. Now, Julia Davis is of Ukrainian descent. And the other thing that they were looking for was any sort of proof that they could find to show that she had paid or forced her husband BJ to marry her in exchange for citizenship into the U.S. It seemed like they were really out to get this chick, really out to get her. They didn't really find much outside of the firearms, and they didn't really have much else to go on in order to charge her with anything. But after this, over the next few years, BJ and Julia were the subject of intense scrutiny, multiple court battles, and just a complete life of fear with the Department of Homeland Security constantly following them, monitoring them, and keeping them under surveillance at all times. What does this have to do with Brittany Murphy? Well, there's tons of speculation as to whether or not Brittany was in fact involved with this situation. Julia Davis herself claims that Brittany Murphy was not only a close friend because, Brittany worked in Hollywood and her husband, BJ, was a Hollywood producer, so it's very likely they ran in the same circles and became friends that way. And not only that, but they were, friends that would hang out. Her, Simon, BJ, and Julia would all hang out together, and yeah, they were just friends. With all the crazy stories going around about Julia, it's said that Brittany Murphy stepped into her defense. She backed her up, she supported her, and she spoke out publicly in defense of Julia Davis, trying to let people know what was going on and tried to let people know that this kind of stuff was happening. Because of this, it seems like it put a target on Brittany's back. Julia Davis claims that over the next few years, the same thing that was happening to her was also happening to Brittany Murphy and Simon. Around this same time period, that's when they had installed the 56 cameras, the fingerprint security locks, and the scramblers to keep their homes safe. So it does seem like they were definitely fearful of something. To make things even stranger, in February of 2007, Simon was actually arrested and held in jail for 9 days because his visa had expired and they were threatening to deport him. After Simon was put in jail for 9 days, once he was released, very shortly after that, him and Brittany ended up getting married, which is what leads a lot of people to speculate whether or not this was a forced marriage. Maybe she was just marrying him so that he could get his U.S. citizenship. We're not really sure, but it blows up the speculation about the whole thing. But because both Julia and Brittany Murphy, they were both dealing with a very similar situation where they're both being accused of having these fraudulent marriages, it brought them even closer together, and it caused Brittany Murphy to be even more vocal in support of Julia Davis. And Julia even claims that Brittany was supposed to testify on her behalf during the upcoming court case that she had. Now, of course, it seems very tinfoil hatty when you think about it. The government's after Brittany, the government's after this Julia chick who's a whistleblower. It all seems very, very conspiracy nutty, which I'm always down for. I love conspiracies. But what if I told you that Matthew Judd, Julia's neighbor, who took the videos of the raid with all the Black Hawk helicopters and stuff, ended up being found unresponsive in his home at the early age of 25. And this was shortly after he turned over the videos that he had as evidence to Julia and BJ. I don't know. It's all very fishy. It's all very concerning. It does make you wonder how badly these guys wanted to silence Julia. But this definitely adds a little bit of salt to the theory. And this is where my interest really got piqued, because if you really think about how deep and dark the Diddy rabbit hole goes, thinking about Tony Busby's comment that I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, how deep does this really go? Banks, corporations, entities, probably goes all the way up to politicians. There's very important people, entities, things at stake here. And if it goes all the way up to the Department of Homeland Security, I mean, Diddy was flying all over the world, flying people that were sex workers back and forth. He was doing all kinds of things across state lines. So it's very possible he had connections and people inside in the Department of Homeland Security. So who really knows? But this really got my gears turning, and I really was starting to think about who would really want Brittany Murphy or Simon to be gone? Who would have the motive to do that? Diddy didn't seem to have the motive to do that. But what I did come back to was the fact that maybe Diddy was the one that had the network that was able to help take certain people out without it raising any eyebrows or raising any suspicion. Maybe he's perfected the art of taking people out like this and silencing people, so that when other people need it to happen, they turn to his criminal network to make it happen, especially when those people are within the entertainment Hollywood realm, and he probably has the closest access to these people. Now, the rest of this is mostly just speculation on my part. I don't really know. I want to know what you guys think at the end of this episode because, well, I just want to know what you think. The similarities between Kim Porter being gone and other celebrities that have passed, all because of pneumonia, all in their bathtub, all under similar circumstances. It just makes you wonder. There's too many coincidences and similarities to just completely ignore it. Now, considering that Simon and Brittany were both friends of Julia and BJ, and Julia and BJ were currently up against the Department of Homeland Security. The Department of Homeland Security likely investigating what possible leverage they had. I'm sure they came across the fact that Simon's visa was going to expire. It doesn't seem very normal for somebody to be arrested immediately after their visa expires. But he was held in jail for 9 days. Why wasn't he deported? Isn't that what happens when you get arrested for your visa expiring? Is there like a grace period that I don't know about? I don't know. Either way, he was not deported, which is very suspicious to me. Not only that, but he was sent right back out where he was able to get married to Brittany Murphy, gain his citizenship, and no longer had any issues to deal with. But it almost seems like out of retaliation for being friends with Julia Davis and BJ Davis, if you take it out on the people close to that person, it could be more damaging and not as directly related back to the Department of Homeland Security. It would be pretty fishy if Julia Davis just one day showed up unalived, right? Everybody would know exactly what happened because of all the issues going on with her. She was silenced by our own government. Normally, I wouldn't think our government would take 2 seconds to think about it. I would have thought that she would already be gone and we would just be left wondering and believing that it was a conspiracy, and that would be that. It would fade into history. It got me thinking. Well, maybe they used Simon and his expired visa and him being in jail as leverage. He's a con man. He's only ever been out for himself. He's only ever looked out for number one, and it's very clear in a lot of the interactions he had with Brittany that he didn't really actually care about her. He seemed more motivated by money and the power that came with being with Brittany Murphy than anything else. So if he's approached with a situation where he might get deported and might have to do something, a favor for the Department of Homeland Security, or be deported, he would probably choose to do a favor for them, I think. I was under the impression that Simon was a celebrity handler. Very similar to last week's episode with Harley Pasternak, I feel like Simon could have been placed into Brittany's life because she was starting to spiral out of control. The way that the two of them met, the way that he was literally a nobody before he met Brittany Murphy, and just kind of the way that he controlled every single move she made, he gave me hardcore celebrity handler vibes. Maybe he was sent in to do something to take Brittany out, to take care of her. Maybe after the whole Ashton Kutcher thing, she knew too much and Diddy wanted her taken out. So he hired this handler, Simon, to go in and do his dirty work. But after growing closer to Brittany, maybe he decided, I don't necessarily want to do this. I don't feel like I can do this. I'm too close with her. And maybe he chose another way out. Or maybe he was just taking too long to do it. And so they decided, okay, fine, we're going to do it ourselves. But let's say for a second that they did send Simon back in to take out Brittany Murphy because she was a threat to the Department of Homeland Security and she was threatening to expose what had happened. And with her major celebrity platform, she could do some serious damage to a pretty big government entity. But if he would have failed, then maybe they would have called on somebody who they knew could get the job done, somebody they could count on. It's possible they reached out to Diddy's network, who has a track record of being able to do this, and utilize those skills to be able to help them out. One of the main reasons I came up with this idea is because of Harley Pasternak. Simon was actually trained by Harley Pasternak for many years, and he racked up a pretty serious bill that he never paid and didn't seem to have any intention of paying either. And making those kinds of enemies, I mean, like I talked about last week, Kanye West firmly believes that Harley Pasternak's a celebrity handler, and he thinks he's truly capable of some super dark things.
He said they were drugging me heavily. People didn't really believe him until, well, people believed him who knew about that, but then others didn't necessarily believe him until he leaked a text message between him and Harley Pasternak.
I seen that.
This individual, Harley Pasternak, let's make this very clear, brother. When you get to a certain level, if you're a black man or woman, you're an artist, you're an entertainer, you're an athlete. And even if you're not black, really, if you're someone who gets to a certain level where you are a multimillionaire, a billionaire, you have a high level of influence where anything that you say, it can change the perception, change the direction of the masses and what they're going to do, how they think, how they move. That's power, but it's also dangerous. So what they did was they put a handler next to him to keep him in check. Harley Pasternak is a former Department of Defense special agent in the Canadian government. Number one, he was a nutritionist. He's a nutritional scientist for the Department of Defense in the Canadian government. So he knows chemistry, he knows how foods operate, but he knows certain drug techniques to use on human beings. He told Kanye, listen, we're going to have a conversation. He said, but we're not going to have a conversation where you're cursing or using profanity, and don't tell me about some stupid thing that your friend told you. He said, the second option is, I can have you committed again. Wow. Now, this is, so first of all, that's a threat. Let's make this very clear. Somebody threatening you, I'm going to have you sent to a psychiatric facility. That's number one. Then he said number two, where you're going to be so doped up and send you back to zombie land again, so that when you're going to be so doped up, your children will no longer be able to play with you in the same way. Playtime with the kids won't be the same. Wait a minute. So he just admitted you were the one that's sent into the psych ward in the first place. That's number one. So now everybody can't say he's crazy. No, he is being handled by an agent who was sent to be right next to him to make sure that he doesn't get out of line. So Harley Pasternak did that, but Harley Pasternak also had other clients like Halle Berry, Jennifer Hudson. He had multiple clients. He has some of the top list of clients that everyone should, take notice at this point. You need to look at this individual because if this Caucasian man threatened to control the mind of one of these people who was our people, regardless of how he is, we need to check our own. So we can handle that. But when somebody is threatening you, taking control of your mind and how your body operates, threatening how you can operate and hang around and be around your children, the relationship you have with your family and your friends and your colleagues, etc., that is a devil, bro. And that is not somebody who should be around you. Everybody who has Harley Pasternak as a trainer should question this man as it pertains to his military history, as it pertains to him using chemistry and drugs and all of that to manipulate people, because all of the artists, all of y'all have someone around you who is being sat next to you, who was sent there to keep you under control. That is a guaranteed fact that I know. So you have to check all of the people around you and look at their military background if they have one. Look at their background to see what their area is when it comes to chemistry, their connections to hypnotists and hypnotherapy, all of this stuff. This is a very critical thing that we all should look at. So that's what I would say when it comes to looking at the whole Kanye situation again.
The text that he sent Kanye says he could have him institutionalized again and so heavily medicated that time with his kids just won't be the same. That kind of threat from a celebrity trainer, like, this guy's no trainer. Who is this guy? The fact that Simon owed him a lot of money, maybe because he had this serious debt to Harley Pasternak, he was told that there's only one way to fix this situation. And perhaps it was because of Brittany's spiral out of control that they had her silenced, because they didn't want to risk the fact that she might speak up about not just this government conspiracy, but all these other things that were going on behind the scenes. But once Simon took care of Brittany, she didn't leave him any of the money that she was expected to leave him. Maybe that left him broke and still unable to pay off those debts. And then as payment, they decided to just take Simon out anyways. It just seems very strange to me. The two of them passing like that, it feels like a hit. It feels intentional. It feels very targeted. Just for some perspective, Harley Pasternak also trained Aaron Carter, Mac Miller, Kanye West, multiple other celebrities. In fact, his list of celebrities is so extensive, you could scroll for quite a while looking at all the celebrities that he's trained and somehow been a part of them looking as beautiful as they do. And with somebody this powerful, this influential, this involved in so many different celebrities' lives, he's essentially a celebrity himself. It's so strange that he would ever send a text like he did to Kanye West if he wasn't more than just a celebrity trainer. He had to know some deep, dark secrets, being as involved with the music and entertainment industry as he was. So to think that he wasn't some sort of planted, hired celebrity handler, he has a history with the Canadian National Defense, so who knows what this guy's capable of? The Department of Homeland Security probably reached out to connections that they have in order to make this happen, and one of those connections was very likely Harley Pasternak. This dude definitely gives me vibes that he's got more going on than just what you can scratch and sniff at the surface. Like I said before, they put up all this security in their house, they were extremely reclusive, and they pretty much never came out of the house except for Brittany's work roles. And a lot of people speculate that this is because they were being followed and surveyed by the Department of Homeland Security. And that would make me stay in my house all the time too. Shoot, I'd be freaked out to even answer the door. So essentially, the theory that I've constructed kind of goes like this. Department of Homeland Security reaches out to their known connections to be able to handle this problem. Harley Pasternak seems to be a major celebrity handler, maybe not directly responsible for the things that happen, but likely could be calling the shots or sending people to do certain things. Simon likely was one of these celebrity handlers, perhaps sent in order to pay off the debt that he owed Harley Pasternak. In order to pay that off, he had to go and be a celebrity handler for Brittany. When Brittany started to get too out of control, he was told to take her out, but he didn't want to do that. So since he wasn't complicit, the two of them both got taken out. So that's kind of what my theory is. That's where I stand on the issue. I don't know if that's necessarily even viable or not. To be honest, I have a really hard time thinking that they both passed from normal, natural causes. It just doesn't seem, if they did, it's an extremely strange coincidence. 100% weird. So I really don't know. And then couple that with Kim Porter's similarities, like, it just feels very fishy to me. And with all of these things now exploding and coming out, I feel like we're getting small little bits and pieces of the puzzle, but we haven't quite gotten the center pieces that we need. All we've got are like a couple of edge pieces. I don't know. Let me know what you guys think about my theory. Let me know what you guys think about everything. I'm not really sure what happened to Brittany Murphy, and it's truly tragic to know that she's gone at the age of 32. That's way too soon. Even though I don't really think Simon was that great of a dude, and I don't really personally like him, and I don't think we would have been friends, it's still sad that he passed away too, especially if it was under some nefarious circumstances and he was actually taken out. Either way, it's a truly tragic story, and I'm not really sure what the truth is, but I do want to know what you guys think. I want to hear what you have to say. So drop a comment below and let me know what you think, because, Well, I feel like between all sides of the story, somewhere in the middle, we're going to find the truth. Unfortunately, my entire theory is mostly weighted on the fact that Julia Davis and Brittany Murphy actually did mingle in the same circle. And not only that, all of the claims that Julia Davis made about Brittany supporting her were true. Because there are claims from Brittany's attorney and her publicist that say they've never even heard of Julia Davis, and neither had Brittany Murphy. There's tons of people saying Brittany Murphy literally had never heard of Julia and she was not going to testify in her trial. A lot of people think that Julia was just capitalizing on Brittany's passing and trying to spread the word about her own case and her own struggles. And in order to do that, she just took advantage of a celebrity passing. I don't know. To me, I don't really see the correlation there. I don't see how a celebrity passing could suddenly then benefit your cause. Honestly, we'll never really know. There's supposedly a documentary that Julia Davis made called The Terror Within. It's supposed to document her entire story and the possible connections with Brittany Murphy, but she goes into more depth about her whole situation than I did. So if you wanted to check that out, you can check that out. Seems pretty interesting. But to think that the government had something to do with this isn't too far-fetched, especially if we think that Diddy's connections extend into the government, into politicians, into their world, into their circles. Diddy was traveling all over the U.S., across U.S. state lines. He was crossing national borders. He was flying people from all over the world to come and engage in these white parties and freak-off parties. I would imagine he had to have some connections within people in the Department of Homeland Security, Border Control, all those different places, especially living in California, so close to the border. It seems like Diddy likely had people everywhere, and that's what he paid them well to do. But I don't know, you guys. Brittany Murphy denied any claims that she was struggling with eating disorders or substance abuse all the way up until the end. It's very possible that maybe her weakened immune system and Simon's weakened immune system really did suscept them to some sort of black mold or something serious like that. It's very possible that there's a totally normal explanation for this that doesn't involve Diddy at all. So, I don't know. What do you guys think? Was it a coincidence? Are we just making too much out of a strange coincidence? Or does Diddy's network go way deeper than we think? Does he have a criminal network that is completely responsible for silencing wealthy elite and people who risk the status quo of this crazy music empire or the status quo that we have in our current wealthy elites? It seems like there's a whole world that a lot of us don't know about because, well, we're just peon poor people, so we don't know what it's like up there. But behind the scenes, it just makes you wonder what's going on. And in order to maintain that power and keep that status quo, it just makes you wonder what ends would they go to continue to maintain the status quo and maintain the wealth and power that they have. But drop it in the comments. Let me know what you think. The other wild conspiracy video I have up right now about the whole Diddy situation it's titled The Diddy Conspiracy, and it's about Jonathan Auty. He is a super interesting guy. His trial actually just started recently. That episode is probably one of my favorite ones that I've done so far. It's just super interesting and super wild and just really makes you think. If you need more sobering stories, I'll throw a playlist right here. I just made an entire playlist of all my Diddy episodes, so everything having to do with Diddy's in one playlist called Diddy Do It. I'll link that right here. And other than that, I just really appreciate you guys sitting and listening to me for this long. And yeah, I look forward to seeing you guys next week for another one. If you or someone you know is struggling, send them my way. Find me on Instagram. Find me on any socials. I'm live on all social media, and I would love to help. I'd love to share my journey and see how I could help you on your journey. But until then, later, sobers.